Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the heart of southwestern Nigeria, where ancient palm groves sway gently in the humid breeze, and the air carries the scent of red earth and simmering pepper soup. You find yourself trudging slowly along a dusty path where the occasional goat bleats lazily, and the only traffic jam consists of 3 chickens and a determined lizard. This is Yoruba land of stories, proverbs, and a kind of wisdom you don't find in books. You're not here to sightsee. No, you're here to learn something quietly miraculous. How, long before weather apps or Doppler radar, Yoruba priests predicted the skies using palm nuts, chants, and uncanny intuition. By the end of tonight, you'll be able to say you almost understand the logic of a system more poetic than scientific, more spiritual than statistical. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive trying to replicate it solo on your rooftop during the next thunderstorm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always lovely to know where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're barefoot now. The ground is warm beneath your soles, and the sun hasn't quite set, but the sky has that purplish blush that means evening is gently approaching. You step into a small Yoruba town, the kind you wouldn't find on most maps. It hums with a peaceful rhythm, children laughing in the distance, someone pounding yam dough with a deep thunk-thunk, and music drifting faintly from a radio older than most of its parts. You pass a row of painted huts with zinc roofs and corrugated smiles. The people greet you with the kind of welcome that's both suspiciously warm and casually indifferent, as if they already know you'll never truly understand, but that's okay. As you round a bend, you're stopped in your tracks, not by any grand monument, but by a tree, a palm tree specifically. It's nothing fancy, just tall, lean, its fronds fanning out like a lazy dancer stretching in the heat. But there's something about it, some quiet authority in its stillness, like it knows things. Maybe it does. Here in Yoruba land, palm trees are more than just trees. They're libraries, shrines, weather stations, and timekeepers. Their sap becomes wine, their fruit becomes oil, and their nuts, well, that's why you're here. You'll come to learn that the palm nut isn't just a seed, it's a key. And in the hands of the right person, it can unlock the very mood of the sky. You settle onto a low wooden stool offered by an elderly man with deep smile lines and eyes that seem to have seen every kind of rain cloud. His name is Baba Ifaleke. He doesn't speak much at first, just watches you with that look adults give toddlers holding fragile things. Then he gestures upward with a flick of his chin. "That one," he says softly, pointing to the tree. "She's a good one. She knows when the sky is moody." You chuckle, thinking he's joking. He doesn't chuckle back. In Yoruba cosmology, trees have moods, winds have opinions, and clouds, well, they hold grudges. It's a worldview that sounds poetic until you realize it also works, at least often enough to be taken seriously. And Baba Ifaleke, he's been listening to the moods of trees and clouds for over 60 decades. He leans forward, motioning you closer. From a worn leather pouch, he pulls a small bundle of hard brown nuts, about 16 in all. Their surfaces are worn smooth by decades of handling. These are ikin, sacred palm nuts used in divination. They're not just thrown like dice. They're cast with intention, rhythm, and a subtle art that, frankly, you'll probably never master. The nuts sit quietly in Baba's palm for a moment. He murmurs something under his breath, then passes them to you. They're heavier than they look, smooth like river stones, and faintly warm, as if they'd been waiting for your hands all along. "Now listen," he says, and that's when you realize he doesn't mean listen with your ears. You close your eyes. The wind shifts. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows with unusual urgency. A child giggles. A drop of water hits a tin roof. Just one. Not rain yet, but maybe soon. This is how it starts. The Yoruba didn't wait for monsoons to surprise them. They anticipated. They watched. They listened. And they trusted the ones who could read the signs, the Yabalaho, the priests of Ifa, whose job it was to decode the moods of gods, ancestors, and weather alike using this bundle of nuts, a chain called the opele, and a staggering memory of over 250-plus oral verses called Odu. Tonight, you'll follow Baba Ifaleke not just through rituals and rhythms, but through centuries of stories. You'll sit beside him as he predicts when the yam fields will need shelter, when the wind might rise too soon, and when it's time to dance for rain. And as the shadows grow longer and the air turns cooler, you begin to understand. Maybe not the whole system, but the feeling of it. Like smelling rain before it comes. Like trusting a tree to speak on the sky's behalf.
That's the kind of night it will be.
You wake before the sun, just barely. The world is gray and muffled. The air is heavy but still, like it's waiting. Somewhere, a rooster gives it a try but doesn't sound convinced. Baba Ifaleke is already up, of course. You find him outside his small compound, seated cross-legged beside a simple altar made of wood and clay, brushing ash off his wrapper like he's dusting the night away. "Today," he murmurs, not looking at you, "we talk about trees." You nod, half asleep, trying not to yawn. He points to a line of palms just past the edge of the village, tall, swaying like they have better places to be. You walk slowly toward them, feet sinking slightly in dew-wet soil, and the deeper you go into the grove, the more the outside world fades. Chickens, voices, radios, they all dissolve into rustling leaves and the occasional plop of a ripe nut falling with the weight of prophecy. The palm trees here aren't planted in neat rows. They're scattered, spaced by instinct or perhaps ancestral memory. Their trunks rise straight and narrow, marked with rings like fingerprints.
You tilt your head back, and for a dizzy moment, it's as though the frongs are watching you in return. Baba joins you, one hand resting on the bark. "These trees," he says, tapping gently, "they don't just give food, they give messages." You learn that the oil palm, Elais guineanensis, is practically sacred in Yoruba cosmology. It provides oil, wine, fibers, wood, and of course, the all-important ikin, the palm nuts used in Ifa divination. And while modern agriculture has turned them into commodities, here in the grove, the trees are still beings with personality, history, and mood swings. He explains how the nuts must be harvested respectfully, at the right time, with prayers and offerings. If they're taken improperly, the nuts won't speak. This isn't metaphor. It's a belief, one that seems strange until you realize that most weather apps get it wrong half the time too.
Historians still argue whether these trees were chosen for their spiritual qualities or simply their usefulness, Baba says with a shrug. But maybe that's the wrong question. You follow him deeper into the grove, where the ground turns sandy and the air thicker. He points out a particular tree, shorter, a bit gnarled, leaning awkwardly like it's trying to whisper something to its neighbor. "This one," he says, "always drops nuts early when Harmattan is coming." You nod like you understand. You don't, but you want to. Then, something strange. He stoops and picks up a palm nut from the ground, rolls it between his fingers, and places it to his ear, as if listening. He hands it to you. "Try." You do. Nothing. Just the faint scratch of your own palm against the husk. But Baba nods approvingly, as if the point wasn't the sound, but the act of listening. In traditional Yoruba understanding, everything is connected. The tree knows the sky. The nut remembers the tree. The priest reads the nut. And the village listens to the priest. It's a closed loop, an ecosystem, not of weather, but of trust. Baba begins to speak more freely now, sharing stories passed down from his father and his father's father. Like the tale of the tree that split itself open after a drought, its sap warning of flood. Or the grove that bore no fruit one year. And sure enough, the rain came so late, the yams shriveled. He chuckles softly. Sometimes the trees lie, but they lie like old men lie. Half on purpose, half by accident. A small gust of wind rustles the canopy above. Dry leaves tumble down like forgotten letters. You sit on a stump, your hand still holding that one palm nut, like a beginner holding a violin, aware that it can sing, but not knowing how to coax it yet. Baba lowers himself beside you, pulling out his bundle of ikin from the same pouch as the day before. This time, he lays them out carefully on a square cloth, black and white, like a chessboard that forgot how to be competitive. Each nut is placed with deliberate grace. "These," he says, "are only taken from trees that still listen. Not all of them do anymore." You think of all the palm plantations you've seen in photos. Endless, lifeless rows of identical trees stretching into monoculture monotony. But these here, they feel lived in, like the difference between a factory and a family. As Baba begins a slow chant under his breath, you notice how the grove itself seems to respond, not in dramatic ways, but in the slight hush of birds, the sudden hush of wind, as if everything is leaning in to hear. He casts the nuts, and they fall with soft thuds, landing in an arrangement you can't decipher. But Baba stares, squints, then nods. "Good," he says. "Mild rain. In 2 days." You raise your eyebrows. He grins. "We'll see if the trees were honest." That evening, as you leave the grove and return to the village, you glance back at that gnarled palm, the one that warns of harmattan. It stands still, slightly off balance, as though still caught mid-whisper. You wonder what it's saying now, and you wonder what else you've missed all your life by not listening closely enough.
The sun is out now, filtering through a fine web of dust stirred by passing footsteps, morning chores, and that one cow who seems convinced she owns the road. You follow Baba Ifaleke down a winding path away from the palm grove and toward a quieter part of the village. The buzz of morning fades, replaced by the soft creak of woven baskets and the hiss of wood smoke curling from cooking fires. You arrive at a circular hut, not grand, not imposing, but deeply intentional. The walls are smooth clay, marked with centuries of fingerprints. Inside, it smells like earth, chalk, and something faintly bitter. Maybe kola nut, maybe wisdom. Baba steps over the threshold and gestures for you to follow. Inside, light trickles in through small carved holes in the upper walls, creating patterns that shift like stars. In the center of the room lies a simple straw mat. Next to it, carefully wrapped in cloth, is something that feels heavier than its size should allow. The opale, or divination chain. It's your first time seeing one up close. 8 small, seed-like discs, often made of sacred wood or metal, strung together by a chain that's been touched by generations of hands. Baba lifts it like it's fragile, though it clearly isn't. There's reverence in the way he lets the links slide through his fingers. You can ask the sky a question, but it may answer in riddles. You take a seat beside him. The ground is warm beneath you, the air slightly humid but calm. He places the opele in your open hands. It has weight but also balance, like it wants to move, to spin, to fall into meaning. Then he demonstrates. With the ease of someone who's done this thousands of times, he casts the chain in a wide, fluid arc. The pieces fall in 2 rows, some face up, others down. He studies them like you had studied the expression of an old friend who'd said something cryptic.
This is Ifa, the ancient Yoruba system of knowledge and divination, and the opele is one of its primary tools. It's not fortune-telling, not exactly. It's more like a conversation between the babalawo and the spiritual force called Orunmila, the deity of wisdom, fate, and the unfolding of all things. Here's how it works. The position of the opele pieces corresponds to binary patterns. Each configuration maps to one of 256 sacred verses called Odu. Each Odu is a story, a proverb, a warning, a diagnosis, and each one can be interpreted differently depending on the situation, the question, and yes, even the weather. Historians still argue whether the Odu were memorized wholesale or improvised in oral form. Some suggest priests carried mnemonic devices. Others think the system emerged organically, the way all great traditions do, out of need, practice, and storytelling. Baba rattles off a verse in a slow, rhythmic tone. You can't understand the Yoruba words, but you can feel them. They move like water. This verse, he explains, refers to a season when travelers were advised not to cross rivers because the rains would arrive sooner than expected. The implication?
Storm in 2 days, just as casually as someone checking a forecast app. You watch as he casts again. This time he pauses longer. Not certain, he mutters. Something is being hidden. He nods to himself as if negotiating with invisible parties. Maybe thunder. Maybe someone lying. You blink. Wait, thunder or a lie? Those are very different things. Baba just shrugs. He says everything is connected. Sometimes weather tells truth about people. Sometimes people lie, and it changes the weather. It's hard to argue when someone says that with such confidence while holding sacred wood and talking to the gods. You ask if the Opele always tells the truth?
He chuckles. Even truth is a matter of timing. Sky may say yes today and say no tomorrow. Not because it lied, but because you asked at the wrong moment. Another cast, another verse. This one about a lizard who failed to heed warnings before flood season and had to take shelter in a cooking pot. You're not sure what it means, but it feels oddly specific. That's part of the genius of Ifa. The verses aren't direct answers. They're metaphor, memory, myth. You have to interpret them like dreams or poetry, like clouds. And yes, Baba says some Odu are used specifically for weather divination, especially during planting season. Farmers will visit a Babalawo to know if rains will come early, if they should hold off on sowing yams, or prepare for a drought. Sometimes the chain says what they want. Sometimes it doesn't. But people listen, because even in a modern world, there's a different kind of comfort in asking the sky questions through someone who has spent his life listening to it. The hut is quiet now. The Opele sits coiled like a serpent, resting. Baba closes his eyes for a moment. You do too. The air feels a little cooler, like clouds are gathering somewhere you can't see. Outside, a faint rumble, thunder, or just a truck on the far road. You smile. Hard to tell. And that, perhaps, is the point. Outside, the afternoon air has thickened into something sticky and drowsy. Even the goats seem subdued, flopping into the shade like furry sacks of disinterest. You and Baba Ifaleke walk slowly, leaving the cool darkness of the divination hut and stepping back into the dusty sunlight. He's quiet, but not absent, just thoughtful, like someone listening to a conversation you can't hear. His hand occasionally brushes against the leather pouch at his waist, the one holding the Opele. You get the sense he never truly puts it away. You're headed to the place where it all begins, or rather, where it falls. A wide woven mat is rolled out near a shaded courtyard, surrounded by walls painted with faded murals of ancestors, deities, and symbols. You sit cross-legged beside Baba Ifaleke. He gently sets down a flat wooden tray covered in ash, chalk lines, and careful smudges. This is where the Ikin, the sacred palm nuts, will speak. 16 nuts, each one smoothed by years of touch, handling, reverence. They're not just tools. They are vessels of memory. They were once part of towering trees, swaying under the same skies, whose moods they now interpret. You watch as Baba takes all 16 into one hand. He chants softly, calling upon Urumila, calling upon the elders, calling upon insight. His voice doesn't rise. It barely trembles the air, but it settles into the corners of the courtyard like smoke. Then he transfers the nuts one by one into his other hand. It's a delicate process with a twist. The goal is to end up with one nut left in the original hand. If there's one nut left, it's marked as a single line. If two or none remain, it's a double line.
This process is repeated 8 times to generate a pattern, just like with the opele, producing one of the 256 odu. It's deliberate, meditative, hypnotic even. The slow clink of nuts, the rustle of cloth, the low murmur of verse. You try it once, fumbling with the nuts like a sleep-deprived squirrel. Baba watches with the kind of calm only grandfathers and seasoned chess players can maintain. "You'll learn," he says kindly, "or maybe not. It's not for everyone." The method might seem needlessly complicated to outsiders. After all, why not just cast them like dice and read the shape? But it's precisely the slowness of the ritual that matters. Each movement is an invitation to focus, to notice, to listen, not just with ears, but with the part of your mind that notices wind changes and the way leaves fall. Historians still debate whether this 8-step transfer was symbolic or practical, Baba says, glancing down at the nuts. But I say, why not both? The pattern finally emerges. Double, single, single, double, single, double, single. Baba nods. He names the odu like an old friend. This one, he explains, is associated with things that arrive unexpectedly. Sudden guests, sudden floods, sudden truths. It's a pattern farmers worry about, but travelers sometimes welcome. Then the interpretation. A strong wind will come, carrying not just rain, but confusion. A good time to wait, to listen, not to act too quickly. You blink. Is this about the weather or your life? Baba just smiles. Ifa never separates the two.
The Yoruba worldview doesn't divide weather, fate, and behavior into tidy boxes. They overlap, blend, bleed into each other. A storm might reflect anger from above, or it might warn of anger below. The palm nuts don't tell the future in the Western sense. They reveal tendencies, like a friend raising an eyebrow before you speak. They invite reflection, not obedience. You ask how often Baba uses the ikan for weather prediction. Every season, he replies, before planting, before festivals, before weddings, especially outdoor ones, he adds with a grin. No one likes soaked cake. He tells a story from his youth when a village elder consulted the ikan before a royal celebration. The nuts warned of sudden winds and shifting skies. The king ignored the message. The guests arrived in silk and lace, and so did the rain. So fierce it knocked down 2 canopies and soaked a foreign dignitary from head to toe. Since then, Baba chuckles, no one in that family marries without a reading. The sun shifts slightly, casting a sliver of shadow across the mat. Baba leans forward and gathers the nuts again. One more cast, he says, to see if the sky is still thinking about us. He chants, transfers, counts, pauses. A different pattern, a different verse, one about a farmer who built the shelter not for crops, but for his dreams. You don't understand it fully, but the way Baba tilts his head, as if the pattern is nodding back at him, makes you believe it holds something valuable. And for a moment, Just a moment. You feel it. The sky breathing just above the treetops.
Later that evening, after the sun has dipped behind the distant trees and left the sky smeared in a warm rust of pink and gray, Baba Ifaleke leads you to a weathered bench under a mango tree. You sit side by side, sipping a lukewarm herbal tea that tastes vaguely like pepper, bark, and regret. The air is still thick, but the breeze has picked up ever so slightly, brushing your cheeks with a promise of change. It's then that Baba begins to talk, not about nuts or chains or sacred verses, but about how the sky once spoke, even before the nuts were dropped or the opele cast. Before all this, he says, waving a hand toward the horizon, the priests watched the sky the way a fisherman watches the river, not just with his eyes, with his body, with his breath. You nod, pretending to understand. He smiles like he knows you're pretending. Before Ifa became formalized, before the casting of Ikin and the memorizing of Odu, there were watchers of the sky. Weather seers, you might call them. They didn't use tools, but something even more delicate, attention. You listen as Baba describes what it was like to grow up learning the moods of the sky. Each morning, his father would rise early, not to pray or cook or even stretch, but simply to watch. He'd study the way the light touched the tops of the palm trees, whether the breeze came from the west or from the wrong side, whether the ants marched hurriedly or not at all. These were signs, clues. Some mornings the sky was blue but too still, a sure omen of an afternoon storm. Other times, the clouds would streak in long, thin lines, pointing like arrows toward thunder you couldn't yet hear. You glance up. Tonight the clouds are scattered like breadcrumbs. Not threatening, not innocent either.
Baba points at one. That one? He's just showing off, he says with a smirk. There's a deeply poetic logic in this way of sky reading. One you quickly realize isn't all that different from how we track patterns now, just softer, slower, less numerical, and more musical. He explains how, long ago, Yoruba communities trained certain individuals to read the sky with such sensitivity they could distinguish between a storm that would pass over and one that would soak the village for days. Not by measuring pressure or calculating dew point, but by noticing subtle differences in how clouds moved, how birds flew, how plants responded. One man, Baba recalls, could predict the beginning of rainy season just by how the leaves of the banana tree curled at night. Another swore that frogs croaked at different pitches depending on whether a light drizzle or a thunderstorm was approaching. Historians still argue whether these accounts were real observations or simply folklore, whether such signs genuinely indicated anything meteorological, or if people simply retrofitted meaning to whatever happened. But then again, historians often forget what it means to live in a place long enough that you can feel when the wind is lying. You ask how often these signs were wrong. Baba chuckles. Often enough to stay humble, rarely enough to stay respected. It was never a precise science, but it didn't need to be. These communities weren't looking for minute-by-minute rainfall maps. They were preparing fields, planting yams, gathering herbs that needed dry leaves and clean dew. The forecasts weren't forecasts. They were felt predictions, half remembered, half intuited. The line between science and story blurs here. And it's not just in the sky. Baba talks about how the movement of smoke from cooking fires could offer a warning. If the smoke hung low and heavy, expect rain. If it rose quickly and disappeared, the air was dry. If it twisted sideways, the wind was about to pick up and probably bring mischief with it. You begin to realize this wasn't a system,
as much as a relationship with the sky, the wind, the clouds, the trees. A daily conversation repeated quietly for generations. Then Baba stands up and walks to a corner of the courtyard where a bowl of water sits uncovered. He points at the surface. In the early morning, he says, if the water shakes just a little, that means a breeze is coming. But if it moves without shaking, just gliding, it's the spirit of a storm. You look. Tonight, the water is still. Not calm, still. As if waiting for something, or for nothing, or for you. Back on the bench, you feel the first real gust of wind since you arrived. Not strong, but definite. The leaves above rustle. The mango tree sways, not enough to drop fruit, but enough to suggest that the night won't stay quiet for long. You sit in silence, trying to feel the sky as Baba does, and maybe, just maybe, you hear it. That soft murmur above the clouds, that subtle shift in mood. The sky isn't just up there being decorative, it's watching, remembering, considering its next move. And now, so are you.
The next morning arrives draped in a heavy mist. It clings to the tops of the banana leaves, rolls across the dirt paths, and hushes the sounds of the village like a damp quilt. You wake slowly to the rhythmic thump of a broom sweeping packed earth, and the distant bleating of a sheep protesting something invisible. Baba Ifaleke is already awake, naturally, and standing beside a carved wooden shrine in the corner of his courtyard. You join him there, curiosity outweighing your reluctance to face the morning humidity. Today, he says, you'll learn about Orunmila, the deity who watches over wisdom, destiny, and the Ifa system itself. Orunmila is more than just the god of knowledge in Yoruba cosmology. He is the embodiment of foresight, of divine order, of knowing what is hidden. And in the context of weather prediction, he's the one who whispers to the Babalawo when the sky is too shy to speak plainly. Orunmila saw all things before they happened, Baba explains, smoothing his robe and nodding toward a painting on the shrine, green, gold, and white strokes forming a figure mid-speech, mid-thought, mid-everything. Orunmila is not just wise, he is memory and prophecy joined together. You learn that the sacred stories say Orunmila was present at the creation of the world. He stood beside Olodumare, the supreme being, as the heavens and earth were formed. He watched each soul choose its destiny before birth, which means that technically he already knows what kind of weather you're going to face, and how well, or badly, you're going to handle it.
Baba tells you how Orunmila taught the first humans to listen, not just to the sky, but to the patterns behind the sky, the rhythms, the metaphors. It was through Orunmila that the Udu, the sacred verses, were passed down. There are 256 Udu, each containing hundreds of verses. That's over 16,000 pieces of poetic code, memorized and recited by heart. No books, just breath and memory. Historians still debate how the Babalawo managed to memorize so many, Baba says, arranging a few smooth stones in a semicircle around the shrine. Some say they had secret writing. Some say it was all training and repetition. I say it was respect. You remember what you respect. You take a moment to reflect on that. When was the last time you remembered something because it was sacred to you?
not just useful. Baba begins to chant softly, invoking Orunmila. The melody is strange, part lullaby, part incantation, with syllables rolling over each other like water over rocks. He isn't performing, he's conversing, and even though the air is still, the chant makes the mist seem to pull tighter around the courtyard. Then he turns to you. "Do you know why the Babalawo predicts rain?" he asks. You shrug. "So people don't get wet?" He chuckles. "No, it's to understand time." You blink, confused, but Baba continues. "The sky is a clock, but not the kind you read with numbers. It is rhythm and mood and pulse. The rain is not just wet, it is timing. It tells you when to plant, when to build, when to stay home, when to dance." And just like that, the entire practice of weather prediction shifts in your mind. It's not about whether or not it will rain. It's about when the world opens for action and when it gently insists that you wait. You imagine a life built entirely around this kind of patience. A village that doesn't rush, a field that waits for permission from the clouds, a priest who doesn't give answers, only rhythms. Later, Baba brings out a gourd filled with palm wine, and you both drink in silence while watching the sky. It's still overcast, still undecided. He tells you another story, this one about Orunmila, teaching a young priest who wanted to control the weather. The boy was impatient, demanding storms for his enemies and sunshine for his festivals. Orunmila warned him, "To control the sky is to carry its burdens." The boy didn't listen. He learned a few tricks, cast the right nuts, sang the right songs, and for a time the sky obeyed. But eventually the sky grew tired. The rains stopped listening. The winds blew backwards. The crops withered. The boy's village scattered. At the end of the story, Baba says nothing more, just lets it hang there, like mist. You understand, finally, that predicting the weather in this tradition is not about manipulation. It's about alignment. To watch, to listen, to live in rhythm with the breath of the world. As the mist begins to lift and the sky grows lighter, you sit with Baba a little longer, gourd in hand, thinking not of apps or forecasts, but of a God who watches in silence, holding every possible outcome in one quiet gaze. The next morning begins with the sound of a drum. Not loud, not urgent, just a soft, steady heartbeat rising from the village square, wrapping around the rooftops like steam. Baba Ifaleke greets the rhythm with a nod and a muttered proverb. When the drum speaks slowly, even the ants can dance. Today, he says, is a festival day. Not the kind with masks and parades, but one of those quiet celebrations meant only for the initiated. A weather ceremony, observed not with fanfare, but with ritual, rhythm, and respect. You're lucky, he adds. They don't happen often, only when the signs align. You ask what the signs were this time. Baba counts them off on his fingers. The morning wind came from the north, but didn't ruffle a single leaf. 3 snakes crossed the same path in a single evening, always a sign of sky unrest. And a certain spider spun a web directly across the village shrine, precisely on the 3rd day of the waxing moon. You blink. That's oddly specific. He grins. Yes, that's the point.
You follow him into the village center where a group of elders, men and women alike, sit in a circle, each holding some object tied to their lineage. A fan, a gourd, a carved staff, a bundle of herbs. They're dressed in earth tones, some with shells in their hair, others with cloth patterned like rolling clouds. All of them have the look of people who know the sky isn't just above your head, it's inside your chest. At the center of the circle lies a wide clay bowl filled with water, palm oil, and a single floating feather. Around it, stones, bones, dried leaves, chalk markings, and the obligatory stubborn goat attempting to eat everything sacred. This is the Asha Ojo, the ritual of rain asking. But it's not about demanding anything from the sky. It's about acknowledging that humans are small and the sky is vast. And sometimes the only appropriate response is to sing. A woman begins the first chant. It's slow, drawn out, like stretching words over a sleeping body. Others join, each voice weaving around the next until the whole thing feels like fabric you could wrap yourself in. You don't understand the lyrics, but you feel the meaning vibrating in your rib cage. Then comes the offering. 6 items, one for each of the elemental forces believed to govern weather in Yoruba cosmology. Water for rain, fire for sun, earth for stability, wind for change, metal for the unseen forces, lightning, thunder, and spirit for the ancestral breath within all things. Each item is placed gently into the bowl. No splashes, no words, just movement and meaning. Baba leans over to you and whispers, "This is not magic. This is alignment. We're not trying to change the sky. We're asking if it's willing to change us." Historians still argue whether these rituals were meteorologically effective or simply psychological comfort. Some researchers suggest they helped synchronize agricultural cycles across communities. Others dismiss them as symbolic theater. But as the chant rises and the goat at long last is dragged away from the sacred gourd, you find yourself caring less about effectiveness and more about connection. These people are talking to the sky in a language older than words. After the offerings, Baba steps forward. He kneels by the bowl and with the gentlest touch stirs the water clockwise. The feather bobs, dips, spins, and then, miraculously, settles dead center. The entire circle nods in approval. That, Baba whispers, means the sky is listening. You ask what happens if the feather doesn't settle. Then we try again next week, or we wait, or we sing louder. The ritual ends not with a conclusion, but with laughter. Soft, knowing laughter, like people who've learned not to take themselves too seriously in the face of clouds. The elders rise, gather their tools, and wander off, murmuring things about yams, goats, and someone's unreliable cousin. You help Baba collect the stones. He gives you one to keep, a small, flat piece of river rock painted with a faded spiral. For your pocket, he says, in case the wind forgets who you are. As you walk back to his compound, you can't help but glance at the sky. Still no rain, still no storm, but you feel different. It's as if you now understand that weather isn't an event. It's a relationship, sometimes generous, sometimes temperamental, always ancient. And tonight, for the first time, you won't check your phone before bed to see the forecast. You'll check the wind.
That night, the village exhales, The wind settles. The air turns velvet soft, like it's decided not to start any arguments. You find yourself lying on a woven mat outside Baba Ifaleke's home, staring up at a sky that's as cluttered as it is eternal. Stars flicker like distant gossip, while the moon, shy tonight, hides behind a veil of wispy clouds. Baba sits beside you, legs stretched out, toes twitching occasionally in rhythm to a song only he can hear. There's no ceremony tonight, no palm nuts, no chants, just you, the sky, and the oldest form of weather forecasting known to humans, stargazing. You know, Baba begins, our ancestors didn't just watch the clouds, they watched the stars too. The ones that stayed still, the ones that moved, the ones that disappeared and came back like old friends. You raise an eyebrow. You mean like constellations? He grins. I mean like stories that shine. In Yoruba tradition, the night sky isn't just decoration. It's a calendar, a compass, and a warning system, all at once. Farmers, fishermen, travelers, and priests all studied it, not with telescopes, but with patience. Patterns of stars were memorized and passed down orally, each linked to events: harvest, storm, birth, or drought. You learn about Orisha Oko, the deity of agriculture, who is said to whisper weather secrets through the stars that rose just before planting season. When a certain star, what Baba calls the farmer's arrow, appeared low in the east, it meant the rains would arrive within a fortnight. Miss that signal, and your yams might rot in the ground before they had a chance to stretch.
Historians still argue whether this was astronomical accuracy or just seasonal routine, Baba says. But does it matter? The stars spoke. We listened. He points upward, guiding your eyes toward a crooked triangle of stars he calls Eti Elwe, the ear of the leaf. According to village legend, when those stars shimmer brightly for 3 nights in a row, the plantains will bloom faster, but only if the moon joins the conversation. It's hard to tell if he's joking, but you hope he's not. As he continues naming constellations you've never heard of: Oshupa Ale, the evening moon's ladder; Ogun's gate, the chicken's escape, you realize something. Even without scientific precision, these star stories offered something far more valuable. They created a shared sense of timing, a way for people to agree when to act, when to wait, when to hope. In a world without global forecasts or Doppler radar, the stars were the most consistent thing around. And by weaving them into story, into myth, into music, people made the sky familiar, personal. You see that cluster there? Baba asks, pointing to a tight grouping of stars just above the treetops. He calls it the basket of dry season. When it tilts, the basket empties. The dust comes. The wind follows. You stare. It does kind of look like a basket, maybe, if you squint a lot. He laughs. You're not ready to predict with it yet. But one day, the stars will stop being strangers to you. He goes quiet for a while, letting you absorb. The quiet isn't awkward, it's part of the lesson. A silence shaped like trust. Then he adds something softer, almost under his breath. The stars do not lie, but they do not rush to speak. You lie back again, watching a faint flicker at the edge of your vision. A meteor, maybe? Or a firefly close enough to pretend. You ask Baba if he's ever been wrong about a star's meaning. He shrugs. Of course. But the stars were not wrong. I was.
And then, because it's late and your eyelids are heavier than truth, he tells one more story. A tale of a village priest who refused to look at the stars for guidance. He said that they were too far away, too slow, too untrustworthy. So he made his own predictions, his own rules, his own timings. He built his own calendar out of stubbornness. And when the floods came a month early, just as the North stars had warned, his house was the first to vanish. Only his chickens survived, clinging to a thatched roof that floated all the way to the next town. That's why we still say, he smiles, if you don't trust the stars, at least trust the chickens. You laugh. You're not sure if that's a proverb, a punchline, or both. Eventually, Baba rises. He heads inside, muttering something about his knees in the sky, both being too old to stay still for long. You stay out a little longer, watching the constellations blur as sleep tiptoes closer. And somewhere between one blink and the next, you start to imagine the stars whispering secrets, not in human language, but in patterns, in slow arrivals, in soft disappearances. And for the first time in your life, you begin to believe the weather is not something that happens to you. It's something that speaks to you.
The next morning begins with the sound of a drum. Not loud, not urgent, just a soft, steady heartbeat rising from the village square, wrapping around the rooftops like steam. Baba Ifaleke greets the rhythm with a nod and a muttered proverb. When the drum speaks slowly, even the ants can dance. Today, he says, is a festival day, not the kind with masks and parades, but one of those quiet celebrations meant only for the initiated. A weather ceremony, observed not with fanfare, but with ritual, rhythm, and respect. You're lucky, he adds. They don't happen often. Only when the signs align. You ask what the signs were this time. Baba counts them off on his fingers. The morning wind came from the north, but didn't ruffle a single leaf. 3 snakes crossed the same path in a single evening, always a sign of sky unrest. And a certain spider spun a web directly across the village shrine precisely on the 3rd day of the waxing moon. You blink. That's oddly specific. He grins. Yes, that's the point. You follow him into the village center, where a group of elders, men and women alike, sit in a circle, each holding some object tied to their lineage, a fan, a gourd, a carved staff, or bundle of herbs. They're dressed in earth tones, some with shells in their hair, others with cloth patterned like rolling clouds. All of them have the look of people who know the sky isn't just above your head, it's inside your chest. At the center of the circle lies a wide clay bowl filled with water, palm oil, and a single floating feather. Around it, stones, bones, dried leaves, chalk markings, and the obligatory stubborn goat attempting to eat everything sacred. This is the Asha Ojo, the ritual of rain asking. But it's not about demanding anything from the sky. It's about acknowledging that humans are small and the sky is vast, and sometimes the only appropriate response is to sing. A woman begins the first chant. It's slow, drawn out, like stretching words over a sleeping body. Others join, each voice weaving around the next, until the whole thing feels like fabric you could wrap yourself in. You don't understand the lyrics, but you feel the meaning vibrating in your rib cage. Then comes the offering. 6 items, one for each of the elemental forces believed to govern weather in Yoruba cosmology. Water for rain, fire for sun, earth for stability, wind for change, metal for the unseen forces, lightning and thunder. Spirit for the ancestral breath within all things. Each item is placed gently into the bowl. No splashes, no words, just movement and meaning. Baba leans over to you and whispers, "This is not magic. This is alignment. We're not trying to change the sky. We're asking if it's willing to change us." Historians still argue whether these rituals were meteorologically effective or simply psychological comfort. Some researchers suggest they helped synchronize agricultural cycles across communities. Others dismiss them as symbolic theater. But as the chant rises and the goat, at long last, is dragged away from the sacred gourd, you find yourself caring less about effectiveness and more about connection.
These people are talking to the sky in a language older than words. After the offerings, Baba steps forward. He kneels by the bowl and, with the gentlest touch, stirs the water clockwise. The feather bobs, dips, spins, and then, miraculously, settles dead center. The entire circle nods in approval. "That," Baba whispers, "means this sky is listening." You ask what happens if the feather doesn't settle. Then we try again next week. Or we wait. Or we sing louder. The ritual ends not with a conclusion, but with laughter. Soft, knowing laughter, like people who've learned not to take themselves too seriously in the face of clouds. The elders rise, gather their tools, and wander off, murmuring things about yams, goats, and someone's unreliable cousin. You help Baba collect the stones. He gives you one to keep, the small flat piece of river rock painted with a faded spiral. For your pocket, in case the wind forgets who you are. As you walk back to his compound, you can't help but glance at the sky. Still no rain, still no storm, but you feel different. It's as if you now understand that weather isn't an event, it's a relationship. Sometimes generous, sometimes temperamental, always ancient. And tonight, for the first time, you won't check your phone before bed to see the forecast. You'll check the wind. By the next day, your feet know the paths without thinking. You step over the roots that snake across the clay walkway, duck beneath the crooked eaves of Baba Ifaleke's compound, and greet the morning rooster like an old rival. Baba is already outside. Squatting comfortably beside a small mound of soil, he's gently poking with a stick. You ask if it's another ritual. "No," he says, "just watching termites." "Oh, of course. Termites." Apparently, in this part of the world, termites are less pests and more profits. Their sudden appearance, disappearance, or choice of construction site can foretell all manner of natural occurrences, especially rain. You see, Baba gestures toward a tiny opening where the insects are moving with focused urgency. When they build up, it means rain. When they dig down, it means dryness. And when they vanish altogether, well, that usually means someone's annoyed them with fire. You crouch down beside him, watching the termites go about their business like tiny clerks late for a cosmic meeting. It's mesmerizing in a way that can only happen when you've finally slowed down enough to let nature outpace your thoughts. "Insects are like tiny sky whispers," Baba mutters. "You just have to listen with your knees." You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds wise, so you nod sagely. The truth is, in Yoruba tradition, animals are rarely just animals. They're messengers, observers, sky mirrors with legs and fur. Chickens, for instance, are often used in divination, not just as sacrifices, but as indicators of spiritual alignment. The way they behave, whether they cross the path before a ritual, whether they cluck nervously or stand calm, can influence entire decisions.
Goats, on the other hand, are regarded as stubborn weather barometers. If a goat refuses to leave its shelter, it might mean a storm is brewing. Or maybe the goat just knows it's Tuesday and doesn't like Tuesdays. The interpretation isn't always literal. It's relational. Even frogs, Baba says, have their say. Their chorus swells before heavy rain, but if the song ends early, it means the rain will be light and short-lived. Historians still debate how much of this was observation and how much was just myth-making, Baba notes, brushing dirt from his palms. But even myths have roots in someone watching very closely. You pause. Isn't that what you've been doing all along? Watching closely? He stands and stretches, his joints popping like old bamboo. Come, let's visit the river. The river lies just beyond the village edge, lazily winding between fields of cassava and stands of sugarcane. You walk in comfortable silence, past children chasing a tire with a stick, past a woman humming as she carries a basket of maize on her head without spilling a single kernel. The river isn't large, but it feels important. Baba steps barefoot into the shallows, cupping his hand to collect water and letting it fall back with a thoughtful splash. Water speaks louder than air, especially when it comes from far away.
He teaches you how to read a river's mood by the color, the smell, even the direction of small whirlpools that form near rocks. A reddish hue might mean upstream flooding. A sudden cooling could signal mountain rains on their way. The wind picks up slightly, sending ripples across the surface. You watch them move, slow and smooth, like thoughts forming just beneath language. Then Baba pulls a leaf from a nearby tree and floats it on the water. If the leaf spins clockwise, the rain will be quick and cleansing. If counterclockwise, it lingers. The leaf hesitates, drifts, flutters, and spins clockwise. Baba smiles. "Good day for washing clothes," he says. You grin. "Is that an official forecast?" "It's as official as anything else," he replies. "At least my socks won't stay wet." The two of you sit on a fallen log, letting the river murmur its secrets. You feel, in that moment, deeply and oddly grounded, as though all the signs, the insects, the stars, the frogs, the wind, aren't just predicting weather, they're predicting you. Because what is weather really but the mood of the world around you? You lean back and close your eyes, listening to the trickle of water, the distant clang of a cooking pot, and the breeze rustling the sugarcane like someone flipping slowly through the pages of a book. A book you're just beginning to understand.
You wake the next morning to a sound that's both familiar and strange. A single drop of rain hitting the corrugated metal roof with the confidence of a percussion soloist showing up early. Then another, and another, until the sky decides, yes, it's time. The rain falls in gentle, uneven patches, as though the clouds are taking turns. You step outside, barefoot, into the cool, damp hush that follows. The air smells of wet earth, leaves, and wood smoke, what Baba Ifaleke calls the scent of Urunmila's sigh. He greets you with a cup of warm, slightly too sour millet porridge and the kind of grin that says, "I told you so," without needing the words. "Didn't I say the leaf spun clockwise?" he asked, sipping his own bowl as if it were tea. Short and sweet. Today, Baba says, you'll learn about the songs of rain. Not metaphors, but actual songs, chants, incantations, work rhythms passed down through generations, each tied to a weather mood. Rain doesn't just fall, it arrives with a soundtrack. He leads you to a small shelter near the edge of his compound, where an old drum leans in the corner, its hide stretched tight despite the moisture in the air. Next to it sits a wooden flute, a calabash shaker, and a folded cloth with shell embroidery. These, he says, are the instruments that spoke before radios, before forecasts, before apps. You laugh at the idea of a Babalowo swiping through a weather app. Bubba frowns. Why swipe when the sky is already talking? Fair point. He begins to play. Softly, slowly. The drum speaks first, low and steady, mimicking the patter of rain on thatched roofs. Then the shaker joins in, like raindrops dancing on dried leaves. Finally, the flute adds its voice, echoing the way the wind curls around corners during a storm.
It's not a performance. It's a prayer in percussion. You learn that certain rhythms were used to summon rain, played during droughts or planting season, always with a specific meter tied to particular odu. Others were to honor the arrival of rain, thanking the sky for remembering its promise. And some songs were warnings, melodies that signaled flooding was near, or that the rainy season had overstayed its welcome. Historians still argue whether these songs truly influenced weather patterns, Baba tells you between verses, but even if they didn't, they gave people something just as valuable, rhythm in the middle of chaos. You ask if every village had the same songs. He shakes his head. No. Each had its own style. Some used metal gongs, some clapped stones, some sang only at dawn. But the purpose was always the same, to sync human time with sky time. You practice one of the rain songs, a simple call and response melody that even your awkward, sleep-hungry brain can follow. Baba sings the call in Yoruba, you reply in hums and hopeful mumbles. As you sing, the rain shifts, it slows, speeds up, slows again. Not as a reaction to your chant necessarily, but it feels connected, as if the sky is at the very least keeping time with you. Then Baba tells you the story of a village that forgot its rain songs. Generations passed, drums fell silent, the sky turned indifferent. Eventually, the people had to rely on foreign calendars and imported forecasts, always a step out of sync. And when the rains came, because they always do, the fields weren't ready. The stories had no place to land.
They built roads instead of rhythms, Baba says, his voice quieter now. You fall silent too, listening not just to the music, but to the rain as its own music. No instruments required. The way it softens the edges of the world, the way it fills pauses that don't need to be filled. Before the lesson ends, Baba wraps the drum in cloth, murmurs something to it, and places it gently against the wall. Always cover your drum after it speaks, he says. It needs rest too. That afternoon, the rain retreats like a polite guest who overstayed by just 5 minutes. You walk the village paths again, the red earth now damp and springy beneath your feet. The leaves shimmer, the birds return, and in the distance you hear someone else, not Baba, singing the same rain song you practiced earlier. It catches you off guard, but maybe that's the point. The songs are meant to be caught, not owned. And as you hum it under your breath, the melody curling in your chest, you begin to understand. Predicting the weather isn't just about noticing signs. It's about knowing what to say back.
The village, rinsed clean by the morning rain, gleams under the renewed sun like someone freshly bathed and proud of it. The chickens look puffier, the goats a bit smugger. Even the red clay paths seemed to strut. The plants in particular seemed thrilled, leafier, glossier, maybe even a little smug themselves. Today,
Baba Ifaleke decides it's time to teach you about dreams. Not the Western interpret your subconscious kind. These are weather dreams, messages believed to arrive while you're asleep, carried by ancestors, spirits, or simply the sky itself. You follow him to his porch, where he's laid out a mat dusted with chalk lines in spirals and zigzags. He places a smooth black stone at the center and sits cross-legged like a schoolboy.
In our tradition, not all weather signs come when you're awake. Some wait for the night. You learn that certain people in the village, usually elders, sometimes children, are known as Alala Ojo, dreamers of the rain. They receive visions of oncoming weather, sometimes as clear as a downpour, sometimes wrapped in riddles. These dreams aren't always accurate, Baba admits, but when taken collectively, across households and nights, they form a pattern of whispers. Historians still argue whether this was simply coincidence, but I say, enough shared dreams become a map. He recounts the tale of a woman who dreamed 3 nights in a row of ants building a bridge across her cooking pot. The elders debated the meaning, eventually agreeing it foretold an early rainy season, and so the yam planting was rushed forward. That year, the harvest was bountiful.
You ask if Baba dreams weather. He pauses. Not as often now, but when I was young, yes. The sky used to visit me while I slept. Once it rained inside my hut in a dream. The next day, we found the river had risen and washed away the lower path. You try to imagine a culture where dreams aren't just personal meanderings, but public forecasts, where you wake and share your sleep not for therapy, but for agriculture. There are rules, of course. Not every dream counts. For a dream to be considered valid, it must repeat over at least 2 nights. It must feature a natural symbol, rain, flood, sun, wind, even a stubborn lizard refusing to move. And it must be shared with an elder before breakfast. Dreams, apparently, sour after too much daylight. Baba teaches you a few common dream signs. White cloth covering the sun means late afternoon rains. Birds nesting in water means flash floods within 3 days. A child handing you a dry leaf means the rain is not yet ready. A talking yam? Well, that one means you need more sleep. You lie back on the mat and let your eyes drift closed, imagining what it must be like to trust sleep so deeply that you organize your life around it. In your world, dreams are distractions. Here, they're signals.
Baba continues. Some priests even use herbs to encourage prophetic dreaming. A tea made from the akinto plant, brewed with rainwater and taken before bed, was believed to open the inner ears. But it had to be harvested at dawn under specific stars and brewed by someone who had never lied on a Thursday. So, not exactly a casual cup of chamomile. You joke that you'd probably dream about forgetting your homework instead. Baba nods seriously. That could mean hail. He tells one more story. A boy in a nearby village once dreamed of a goat on stilts walking through a dusty sky. No one could interpret it. 3 days later, an unseasonal harmattan wind swept in, full of grit and dryness, and ruined the early maize. The elders concluded the goat represented stubbornness, the stilts elevated movement, and the dust, well, that part was obvious. From then on, the goat on stilts became village shorthand for unexpected dryness. You sit up,
mind buzzing with symbols, wondering what your dreams would predict. Traffic jams? Wi-Fi outages? Or maybe just a gentle, cloud-covered morning like this one. As you leave the porch, Baba gives you a small, knotted pouch of herbs and a smile. He says, "Put this under your pillow, just in case the sky visits." And that night, as you fall asleep to the sound of tree frogs rehearsing their opera, you find yourself hoping, maybe even expecting, that your dreams will smell faintly of rain.
You wake just before dawn, startled by the strange feeling that you've forgotten something important. Except you haven't. It's just that your mind is unusually full. A dream, vivid as lightning behind closed eyes, lingers in your memory like the scent of a half-burnt candle. You sit up slowly. The mat beneath you still smells of chalk and old prayers. Baba Ifaleke appears as he always seems to, at just the right moment, carrying a small calabash of warm pop and looking entirely unsurprised. "Well?" he asks, lowering himself beside you with a soft grunt. "Did the sky knock?" You describe the dream as best you can, walking barefoot across an endless yam field, your feet sinking into soft red soil with each step. The sky was neither dark nor bright, but a deep, humming gray. In the distance, a rooster was singing, but in reverse, like someone rewinding time. Baba nods thoughtfully. "Ah, a reverse rooster. That's an interesting." You raise an eyebrow. "Is that a thing?" "It is now," he says, utterly serious. "Let's go interpret it." He leads you to the dream table, a flat stone beneath a fig tree near the back of his compound. It's surrounded by little objects, bones, shells, pebbles, dried seeds, all organized in neat semicircles. "This is where we sort what sleep leaves behind," he says. The process is more art than science. Baba doesn't offer direct translations. No rooster equals 30% chance of light rain. Instead, he draws connections. Roosters are morning. Reverse roosters might mean delay. Yams are rooted. Soft soil might suggest sogginess. The sky's mood is crucial. And in your dream, it didn't threaten nor smile. It waited.
So, Baba concludes, this dream says the rain is coming, but it's hesitating. Historians still debate whether this system was psychological, poetic, or deeply empirical, he muses as he marks a chalk symbol on the stone. But when enough people dream the same pattern, even scholars start to listen. You ask if everyone in the village shares their dreams. Not everyone, he says, but the ones who listen to their dreams tend to be better at listening to people too. And that sticks with you. Then he reaches for his divination chain, a sacred object called opele, strung with 8 seed pods, each marked with symbols. It's not just used for yes or no answers. It's for nuance, for weather questions too delicate for palm nuts or too faint for dreams. He casts a chain across the dream table. It lands with a soft clatter, the seed pods arranging themselves like an accidental constellation. He studies the pattern, 2 symbols open, 6 closed. His brows furrow, then relax. "Yes," he says slowly, "rain is near, but something resists, like a door that doesn't want to swing." You wait, not wanting to interrupt his thought. Maybe the land isn't ready, or maybe the people aren't. You think of the half-finished thatched roof you saw near the yam barn yesterday, of the goat pen that was only 3 walls and a hope. Maybe the rain waits, not because it's unsure, but because you are. It's the first time the weather feels like it's mirroring people, not just visiting them. As the sun rises, golden and calm, Baba rises too, brushing dust from his knees. He hands you a folded leaf tied with red thread. Inside are 3 tiny seeds. Plant these before sunset, he says, just for practice. If the soil is wet enough tomorrow, that's her answer. You want to ask what kind of seeds they are, but decide not to. Somehow, the not knowing is part of the lesson. That afternoon, you walk to the edge of the field and press the seeds gently into the earth, just as the sky begins to darken slightly, not with rain yet, but with possibility. And as you cover them with soil, you realize the dreams, the chants, the palm nuts, the drums, they're all just different ways of asking the same thing. Are we ready for what's about to arrive?
By late morning, the sky has taken on a soft, metallic sheen, the kind of light that makes green things glow too brightly and shadows stretch a little too long. It's the sort of day that makes the villagers tilt their heads instinctively, sniff the air, and murmur things like, "She's thinking about it." She, of course, being the rain. You and Baba Ifaleke sit beneath a large almond tree, watching the sky like it's an old friend arriving from far away, suitcase in hand, deciding whether to knock or turn back. The seeds you planted yesterday rest silently in the soil, and you both pretend you're not waiting for any signs. But you are. Of course you are. Today's lesson is about clouds. Not just what they look like, but what they mean. In Yoruba weather watching, clouds are not merely decorative fluff. They're moods in motion, thoughts made visible, and sometimes warnings disguised as softness. Baba begins by pointing to a low drifting formation to the west, wispy but dense, like pulled cotton dipped in ash. "Awo ewe ogedet," he says, "banana leaf clouds." You blink. They look like banana leaves? No, they act like banana leaves, he clarifies. They curl when they're hiding something. In this case, a late afternoon downpour, lightly heavy, but short. He tells you these clouds tend to precede rains that are meant to clean, not flood, a kind of sky housekeeping. You learn that cloud types here are not named after Latin roots, but local metaphors.
Eruoru, the servants of the sky, small scattered clouds that run ahead of real weather like gossipy messengers. Igbojo, rainforest clouds, massive and layered, dark at the base, pregnant with wet promises. Oshupambo, moon-covered clouds, veils of thin mists that warn of cold nights and confused frogs. Baba shows you how to read not just the shapes, but the speed of their travel, the angle of their drift, even how birds fly beneath or above them. He notes how the egrets have been flying unusually low, their white feathers almost brushing the treetops. Birds hate getting their heads wet, he says with a smile. If they're ducking, you should too. Historians still debate how much of this cloud wisdom was trial and error and how much was inherited intuition. Some argue it's just pattern recognition dressed in poetry. Others suggest it was a kind of folk meteorology refined through centuries of storytelling, farming, and sheer necessity. Science of spirit, Baba shrugs. Clouds still come when they want. You begin to notice things you never paid attention to before. The way cloud edges dissolve faster when the wind comes from the east. How certain patches brighten slightly before releasing rain. And that rare moment when the entire sky goes silent, as if inhaling.
Baba tells the story of a hunter who ignored cloud signs 3 times in 1 week. On the 4th day, he was caught so deep in the bush during a thunderstorm, he had to tie his canoe to a tree and wait 2 nights for the flood to recede. Ever since, the phrase, "Don't pull a 4th-day hunter," became local shorthand for ignoring the obvious. Then comes your first solo reading. Baba gestures to the sky. "Tell me what that one means," he says, pointing to a dark, trailing shape stretching across the southern horizon. You squint. It looks like someone smeared charcoal across the clouds with lazy fingers. Not round, not sharp, just patient. It's unbothered, you offer. Baba laughs. Not bad. That's Eje Horun, or sky blood. Not violent, just slow and soaking. Evening rain, very likely. Pack the laundry in. You're starting to see that learning weather here isn't about data. It's about dialogue. The clouds aren't objects, they're characters. They sulk, they bluff, they tease, and sometimes they shout. But mostly, they just wait to be understood. By sunset, your eyes are sore from looking upward, but you're hooked. You've stopped seeing the sky as background. It's become a landscape of movement, of feeling, of quiet suggestions whispered through shape. You lie back on the same mat where you first dreamt of reversed roosters and yam fields, watching the clouds pass slowly, like elders telling long stories without rushing. And as a cool breeze lifts your shirt hem, you smile, because today you didn't just see the clouds, you heard them. The next day begins with a thick golden haze that turns the village into a watercolor painting. Blurry edges, soft outlines, and that faint scent of warming soil. Baba Ifaleke calls it a waiting morning, the kind where nothing happens immediately, but everything feels like it's about to. Over breakfast, sweet yam cakes and bitter leaf tea, he announces today's lesson with a flourish: weather taboos. Yes, even the weather has rules. You nearly drop your cup. Taboos? Like you can't whistle during a storm? Worse, he says, eyes twinkling. Whistle during a storm and the wind might borrow your name. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it doesn't sound great. In Yoruba tradition, weather isn't just natural, it's spiritual. The sky is a living force, filled with orisha, ancestors, and unseen energies. As such, there are ritual do's and don'ts when it comes to interacting with it. Break the wrong one, and you don't just risk getting wet, you risk offending the very forces that hold the rain, the sun, and the lightning in their hands. Some of these taboos are practical. Don't point at thunder. It's considered mocking Shango, the Orisha of thunder and lightning. You might attract his attention, and let's just say, he doesn't laugh easily. Don't sweep water off your roof toward the street during the first rain of the season. It's believed to wash away blessings that were meant for your household. Never cook with rainwater collected on a Wednesday. No one knows why exactly, but no one dares to try.
Others are more symbolic. If a pregnant woman walks in a sudden gust of wind, she must tie a red string around her left wrist before sundown to anchor the breath of her unborn child. During the first thunderclap of the year, everyone is expected to touch the earth, either with hands, knees, or even just a nod. It's an offering of respect, a way of saying, "We hear you." Baba says, sipping his tea. Historians still debate whether these practices were born from fear, reverence, or just a good story passed around the fire too many times. But here we say, better to bow to the sky than ask why later. You nod, slowly realizing that weather taboos serve a deeper purpose. They teach respect for uncertainty. In a world where rain could make or break your survival, behaving as though the rain had feelings might just be a smart strategy. Baba tells the story of a man who laughed during a storm, not a polite chuckle, a full-bellied, arms-flailing guffaw while thunder shook the village. The next week, his roof flew off in a wind so precise it tore nothing else. Was it coincidence? Maybe. But ever since, the man was known as Okunring Inring, the man who mocked the sky. Your favorite taboo, though, has to do with sneezing during a lightning storm. If you do, you must say aloud, Bofi asunre funrarun, which isn't an easy thing to remember with the prospect of fire hanging over your head. You try very hard not to sneeze the rest of the day.
Some taboos are weather-specific too. During the harmattan, you must not insult the dryness. Complaints like, my skin is cracking, must be replaced with compliments. The air today is strong and proud. When the rainy season ends, it's forbidden to thank the rain aloud. That shows you think you've survived it alone. Instead, people express thanks in cooking, by making a dish with tubers grown during the rains and sharing it with neighbors. Food is how we speak back to the weather, Baba says. Words might lie, but stew tells the truth. Later that day, as you help hang laundry beneath a sky that now looks suspiciously smug, you notice an old woman muttering softly before pinning each cloth to the line. You ask what she's saying. She's asking the wind not to run off with her wrapper again, Baba chuckles. Last time, it ended up on the roof of the mosque. He can't help but admire it all, the rules, the rituals, the little moments of reverence. It's not about superstition, it's about etiquette. How to live in a world where the sun and rain aren't just facts of life, but neighbors with moods and memories. That night, as the first stars poke holes in the dusk, you whisper your thanks to the sky, not aloud, but in the way you fold your mat, in the way you hum the rain song before bed, in the way you don't point when you see a flash of lightning on the horizon. Because maybe, just maybe, the weather's watching, and it never forgets a good guest.
The morning arrives with a gentle breeze curling in through the window slats like it's looking for breakfast. You're still half asleep, the smell of charcoal and groundnut oil wafting from someone's nearby fire nudging you upright. Baba Ifaleke appears at the door just as you rub your eyes, holding 2 carved gourds in one hand and an onion in the other. Today, he announces, we talk about omens, specifically weather omens. But first, onion soup. You sit together on low stools beneath a pawpaw tree, slurping broth that's spicy enough to keep your attention and light enough not to drag you down. Baba begins, as usual, not with a definition, but with a question. What do you think is the difference between an omen and a sign? You hesitate. A sign tells you what's coming. An omen warns? He smiles. Close. A sign is a whisper. An omen is a poke in the ribs. In Yoruba thought, omens aren't just random oddities, they're interruptions in the expected rhythm of the day. They don't always bring bad news, some bring blessings, but they always demand notice, especially when it comes to the weather. Baba tells you of a few well-known weather omens. If the village well suddenly overflows without rain, it's a sky reset, meaning the coming storm will be unusually cleansing. If a frog croaks continuously during a full moon,
Expect rain within 7 hours, not a moment more, not a moment less. If a lizard falls from a rooftop and lands belly up, postpone your journey, even if the sky looks clear.
You learn that omens come in many forms. Animal behavior, ants climbing trees, equals incoming floods. Plant motion, banana leaves folding inward at noon, equals sky unrest. Unexpected sounds, like hearing thunder before sunrise, equals trouble for traders. Historians still argue whether this was environmental science with dramatic flair or drama that happened to be scientific, Baba says, scratching behind his ear with the onion. But either way, it worked more often than not. He pulls out one of the gourds and begins shaking it gently. Inside, something rattles like tiny bones. This, he explains, is used to trap omens. You blink. Trap them? Well, more like, ask them to repeat themselves. If something strange happens, say a palm nut cracks in your pocket, you shake the gourd and listen. If the sound changes, the omen is real. You give him a long look, and if it doesn't change, then maybe it was just a nut with stage fright. He teaches you to listen not just to what's unusual, but what's slightly off, like the wind blowing from the west in the morning, or the sky going quiet when it should be loud. Even the smell of the air can be an omen. A sweet molasses-like scent at midday, that means hail is lurking somewhere nearby, ready to surprise your laundry.
And then there's the ultimate omen, a silent rainbow. Baba says if you see a rainbow and no one else mentions it, even though it's clearly visible, don't point, don't speak. That means it wasn't for humans. It's for the sky gods, he whispers. And if you interrupt, they might take something back. You shiver a little, despite the warmth. He tells one last story. A traveling drummer once arrived in the village with 3 roosters in a basket. That evening, all 3 escaped and perched, without moving, on the roof of the shrine, staring south. No clucking, no pecking, just stillness. That night, a lightning storm struck not the village, but a nearby grove that had gone untended for too long. The next day, Baba Ifaleke's father declared the roosters warning spirits and gave them honorary names. They were never cooked. You wonder aloud if people today still believe in omens. Some do. Some don't call them omens anymore. They say strange coincidence or bad timing. But their hearts know. Deep down, everyone feels it when the world twitches. That night, just before sleep takes you, you hear a dog bark once, sharply, then go silent. No follow-up, no echo. Just that one bark. You sit up, listening. Nothing. You whisper to yourself, was that a sign or an omen? And somewhere far off, as if answering, a frog croaks 3 times in a row. By now, you've stopped expecting a normal day in the village, because every day is a lesson, a layer peeled back from the quiet pulse of Yoruba life. This morning, Baba Ifaleke greets you with a bundle of fresh leaves, a faded scroll, and a very large snail. "Time to talk about weather calendars," he says, placing the snail gently on the table like a guest of honor. "But not the kind with boxes and holidays. In the world you came from, calendars are rectangles on a fridge. Here, they're rhythms etched in nature, in behavior, in taste. They're not tracked by numbers, but by smells, birdsong, fruit skin, and the texture of rain. Real time isn't written, it's lived." You begin with the Ifa lunar calendar, a traditional system loosely structured around the moon's phases, but filtered through divination. While the Gregorian calendar marches forward with certainty, the Ifa calendar adjusts, bends to the unseen mood of the world. A planting date might shift if the palm nuts fall unusually early. A ceremony might be delayed if a dreamer sees a white goat in a flooded path. It's flexible, but not arbitrary. Historians still debate how much of it was agricultural instinct versus spiritual obedience, but the yam never argued, and that's what mattered. He spreads out the faded scroll. On it is a seasonal chart, hand-drawn and inked with symbols instead of months. A horned moon over a gourd means dry season begins. A lizard crawling up a staff means time to harvest root crops. 3 vertical slashes next to a drum means the festival of wind when the harmattan arrives.
And beneath it all, no year, no dates, just relationships between events. If this, then that. If rain here, then yams there. You trace your fingers over the drawings. They don't tell time, they explain it. Then you meet the snail. Its name, according to Baba, is Olokun Jr. It's not a pet, but a timekeeper. Apparently some elders used snails to measure the change of seasons by the thickness of their slime, their resting cycles, and the way they respond to humidity. If Olokun doesn't want to leave his shell, rain is still far away, Baba explains. But if he's sliding across the cooking stone, better bring in the cassava. You watch the snail make its way across a wet leaf, steady, purposeful, completely indifferent to your curiosity. You can't help but be impressed. Next, Baba takes you to the edge of a clearing where a narrow stick pokes from the ground. It's not just a random marker, it's the village's shadow stick, used to track sun angle through the year. By watching the length and direction of the noon shadow, elders could anticipate the turning of the dry season into wet. If the shadow shortens too quickly, they prepare for unexpected storms. If it lingers long and thin, the harmattan may last. The villagers also measure time with tastes. The first mango to turn sour signals the midpoint of the planting calendar. Bitter cola tasting unusually sweet. Rain is near. The tongue becomes a calendar in its own right.
You also learn that some calendars are completely auditory. The return of a certain bird, the Oya Olorin, or wind singer, marks the start of the windy moon. Its cry, sharp and descending like a flute dropped in a well, is unmistakable. If you hear it more than once in a week, it's time to reinforce the rooftops. Calendars even exist in smell. Baba tells you that when the wind carries the scent of unripe palm fruit, it means the new moon will bring drier days than expected. The takeaway? Time here isn't just about when. It's about what's happening while it passes. That evening, as you sit in the fading light, you try to build your own weather calendar, mentally. Day 1, watched ants. Confused. Day 5, dreamed of yams. Baba nodded solemnly. Day 10, rainbow didn't speak to me. Day 13, snail moved twice. Feels important. Day 17, wind smells like wet rope. Rain close? And suddenly it clicks. This isn't a schedule. It's a conversation. With the ground, the wind, the plants, the birds. You're not just a visitor anymore. You're a participant. The moon rises full and quiet, and somewhere far off the wind singer calls again. And this time you notice.
The night arrives without drama. No wind, no thunder, no sky theatrics, Just a smooth exhale from the universe, and a sky so dark it swallows your thoughts whole. You fall asleep quickly, belly full of boiled plantains and mind gently humming with yesterday's talk of living calendars. By morning, something's shifted. It's not the air exactly, it's how quiet everything is. No chickens, no bells, not even the distant rustle of market chatter. Just silence, like the village hit the pause button on life. Baba Ifaleke meets with the gate, holding what looks like a broom dipped in ash. "Storm's coming," he says, without looking up. "A serious one." You glance at the sky. It's gray, sure, but still soft. You wouldn't have guessed anything dangerous was lurking above. "That's because you're listening to your eyes," Baba grunts. "Today, we learn to read the air pressure the old way." In the modern world, air pressure is the domain of digital sensors, barometers, and incomprehensible app graphics. Here, it's different. You feel it in your bones, or in this case, your skin. "Hold out your arm," Baba instructs. You do, hesitantly. He waves the ash-dipped broom over your forearm, slowly. "What do you feel?" Ticklish?" He frowns. "Try again."
You pause. The ash clings to your skin differently. Slower, maybe. It seems denser, heavier. "Exactly," Baba says, satisfied. Heavy ash means the sky is pressing down. That's low pressure, storms nesting. He walks you through other traditional pressure tests, used long before anyone heard of millibars. Palm frond curling inward means dropping pressure. Dogs pacing in circles or scratching the earth is nervous air, shifting weight. Beans taking longer to boil, increased atmospheric tension. No, really. You laugh, thinking he's joking, but Baba swears by it. Ask any good cook. Pressure changes the pot before it changes the sky. You spend the day performing small pressure-checking rituals, watching a bowl of surface water for tiny ripples, even when there's no wind. Lighting a small flame and observing whether it leans without flickering, a sign of steady low pressure. Holding an open gourd near your ear and listening for a faint whistle sound, said to be the breath of the sky retreating. Historians still debate whether this was superstition disguised as science or science that lost its language over time. You're beginning to think it doesn't matter. What matters is that this entire culture was designed to notice, and not just casually, deeply, repeatedly, until noticing became wisdom. In the afternoon, the pressure begins to drop so clearly you feel it. The birds vanish. The leaves hold still. Even your breath comes slower, thicker. And then Baba brings out the sacrifice mat. Before the storm, it's traditional to leave a simple offering outside, not to stop the storm, but to acknowledge its power. A bowl of groundnuts, a splash of palm wine, sometimes a poem whispered into the soil. It's not begging, Baba says. It's good manners. You help arrange a small altar near the yam storehouse. The mat holds a kola nut split into 4 perfect quarters, a pinch of salt, 1 bright blue feather found on the path earlier that day. You whisper your own wish to the sky, not asking for it to go easy on you, but just to remember your name. By nightfall, the pressure is thick as honey. You feel it in your jaw, your temples, even your joints. And when the first rumble of thunder rolls in like a massive drumbeat from somewhere just beyond the hills, you don't flinch, because now you're part of the forecast. You lie back on your mat, candlelight flickering, storm creeping closer with a kind of sacred slowness. And as you close your eyes,
you realize this isn't just weather. It's a visitor. And the sky always knocks first, if you know how to listen.
The storm arrives like a respected elder, slow, loud, and full of opinion. It begins with a low growl in the distance, somewhere beyond the banana groves. Then a gust of wind rolls through the village like someone sweeping dust from the sky. It smells of charcoal, wet bark, and something metallic you can't quite name. You sit at the threshold of Baba Ifaleke's hut, wrapped in a cloth that still smells faintly of soap and smoked fish. Beside you, Baba sips a steaming brew from a clay cup. Now we talk about the sound of weather, he says, not breaking his gaze from the dancing shadows outside. Because storms speak long before they shout. And just like that, the sky begins its monologue. The first raindrops are polite, scattered, testing the roof. Then comes the drum roll, thick splats on banana leaves, drumming on wooden eaves, pattering against empty gourds like an impatient rhythm section. Yoruba people have over a dozen names for rain sounds, Baba says. Each one means something. You learn pele, soft rain that sounds like fingers tapping cloth. It's rain with manners. Toko, heavy rain bouncing off mud, loud, clumsy, confident. Shatha, sideways rain, blown by wind, slapping walls and confusion in equal measure. Dununun, the echo of thunder in a clay courtyard, not lightning's brother, but its echoing tale. Historians still debate whether the musicality of Yoruba language influenced how rain was described or the other way around, Baba mutters. But either way, rain here sings. The thunder tonight is not the sudden Hollywood crack you know. It's layered, like old drums being turned in a cave. Sometimes it rolls across the sky like a cart full of stones. Sometimes it pops like the throat of a god clearing itself.
And then there's the lightning. It flashes without warning, slicing open the clouds with surgical grace. Each bolt reveals the bones of the landscape for a heartbeat. Trees etched in silver, goats frozen mid-chew, puddles shimmering like doorways. Never count between the flash and the thunder, Baba says. That's not how we measure. We feel the vibration in our ribs. If it shakes the chest, the storm is angry. If it tickles the belly, it's just passing. You place your hand on your sternum and wait. Boom. A gentle rumble. You giggle involuntarily. Belly, you say. Baba grins. She likes you. You learn how storms affect language, too. During heavy rains, people speak in lower tones, not just to be heard, but to match the mood. Shouting during a storm is discouraged. It's considered rude to compete with the sky's voice. You also learn about the storm prayers, short phrases spoken during thunder to honor Sango, the Orisha of lightning. Not to ward him off, but to acknowledge his passage. Baba teaches you one. Kambo, Obaina, Mafi Ibenure Bawa. Welcome, King of Fire. Do not grate us in anger. You whisper it under your breath as another bolt of lightning streaks across the canopy, bright enough to reveal the glint in Baba's eyes.
Later, the storm eases. The thunder moves further away, trailing off like a storyteller who's forgotten how their tale ends. The rain becomes pele again, soft, meditative, sleepy. And the sounds shift from storm to afterstorm. Frogs begin their chorus, eager to gossip. Roofs creak as water cools the iron. The earth itself exhales, steam rising from stone like breath from a tired dancer. Baba leans back, content. That, he says, is how you listen to a storm without ears. You nod slowly, realizing you've never really heard rain before. Not like this. You're not just a listener now. You're a participant in the soundscape of weather. And as you fall asleep to the murmur of leftover rain, your dreams echo not with words, but with rhythm. Patter, roll, snap, whisper. Like the sky humming a lullaby it's known for centuries.
The world after a storm is never the same. It doesn't shout about it, but it feels different. The ground holds water like a secret. The air is thick with the scent of new leaves and wet charcoal. Even the goats walk slower, like they're treading carefully through someone else's dream. You stretched on your mat, your body damp from the night's heavy air, and hear Baba Ifaleke already bustling outside, his footsteps squishing slightly in the soft mud. He's humming a tune that sounds like a lullaby someone forgot to finish. Today's lesson: how the Yoruba predicted seasonal change through insects. Forget satellites, Baba says, lifting a wooden tray full of bugs like it's a tea set. We have crickets, termites, and fireflies. You blink at the tray. It's filled with neat labeled gourds and woven containers. One makes a faint scritch, scritch noise. Another glows faintly in the shade. Baba picks up a tiny clay whistle, blows it once, and dozens of small insects come crawling out from a nearby mound. Meet the calendar crew, he says. You're introduced first to the rain cricket, locally called a keke. It sings only before certain types of storms. Its chirp isn't loud, but rhythmic, one note high, one low. When they start duetting yam fields, farmers tighten their roof ropes. Historians still debate whether these insects were tracked deliberately or became incidental messengers over time, but oral tradition remembers. Then comes the flying termite, or kumukumu. Baba lifts a cloth, and a handful flutter up, delicate and slightly dumb-looking. These are more than just a midnight snack. They emerge in droves just before a long rain break. That strange gap in the middle of the wet season when everyone thinks the rain has given up. It hasn't.
If you eat the first one you catch, the dry spell will be brief, he says, handing you a roasted one. You chew cautiously. Tastes like nutty air and crunch. He goes on. Fireflies move lower to the ground before heat lightning storms. Ants build mound doorways in different directions depending on wind change. Butterflies vanish before harmattan, not because they flee, but because they're hiding from the dust. There's also a spider, not venomous, just wide and unbothered, that begins spinning its web horizontally instead of diagonally when it senses a shift in humidity. No one knows why, no one questions it. The villagers even have an old saying, when the spider builds a hammock, bring in the millet. You and Baba spend the afternoon watching ants. Not your most thrilling assignment, until you notice that half of them are crawling in wide arcs, not their usual straight lines. Storm season ending, Baba says casually. They're scouting for new routes. You stare. Because of the weather? No, because of what the weather makes possible. Soft ground means easier tunnels, that's all. You begin to understand. It's not about the bugs being magical weather sensors. It's about them adapting, and humans noticing those adaptations. You learn the names of 3 insect-specific months. Osu'au and Kekeke, when crickets dominate the night and herald returning rains. Osukumu, termite moon, during the swarm festivals and unpredictable gaps in rainfall. Osu'ina Appa, side fire month, named after the fireflies and dry lightning flashes that often sneak in ahead of drought.
By evening, Baba shows you a netted basket of insects gathered that day. He lays them out gently, almost reverently, each one like a letter from the sky, written in tiny legs and wings. You hold a beetle the size of your thumbnail, its back shimmering like wet bronze. You think it doesn't know what's coming? Baba asks. These creatures are born from rhythm. They remember the climate that made them. And in that moment, it hits you. You've spent your life looking at weather above, but here, the true prophets might just crawl below your feet. That night, as you lie under your mosquito net, you listen, not for wind, not for thunder, but for chirps, clicks, tiny scuttles. The insect choir hums 1,000 predictions, and this time you understand just a few, which, for one day, is enough.
You wake to a faint drumming, not from the sky this time, but from below. A soft tap, tap, tap echoes through the floorboards. It's not threatening, more like the sound of someone knocking gently to see if you're awake. You step outside and realize it's the drip, drip rhythm of water falling from hundreds of banana leaves onto the earth. The storm may have passed, but the world is still drying its hair. Baba Ifaleke greets you with a wide grin and a small bucket filled with dark, slick stones. Today, we talk about the smell of weather. You blink. That's a thing? Oh yes, he says, placing one of the stones beneath your nose. What do you smell? You inhale. It's earthy, metallic, and oddly familiar. Rain? He nods. Petrichor, they call it now, but we've always known it as the breath of Orun. He explains, when the first drops of rain hit dry soil after a long heat, the scent that rises isn't just mud, it's memory. A chemical signal from plants, bacteria, and rocks, all stirred into life again. In Yoruba tradition, these scents have names and meanings, not poetic ones either, functional ones. Ifokambale Orun, sky's reassurance, the soft, mossy smell before calming drizzle. Ibanuje ile, earth's grief, the acrid, burnt smell that arrives just before a thunderstorm. Ofokiniyu, lions passing, the dry, bitter whiff carried by the harmattan wind.
Historians still argue whether the vocabulary evolved from actual weather watching or mythic imagination, Baba says, rolling a smooth stone between his palms. But even lions leave scent trails. You learn that villagers used to forecast entire days by scent. If the morning wind carries a peppery dryness, it's a sign that the afternoon sun will be unusually strong. If the scent of rotting fruit hangs in the air at dawn, it means moisture is trapped low, indicating localized rain. One old woman in the village, Baba says, was so skilled in scent reading she could predict rainfall to the hour. They called her Mama Imonimi, grandmother who smelled the hour. Of course, there were rituals too. On the morning of big planting days, elders would listen with their noses. They'd wave strips of cloth through the air and sniff them like sacred scrolls. If the cloth came back carrying the scent of copper or charcoal, the ceremony would be delayed. You also learn
that plants can send scent-based warnings. The leaves of the bitter cola tree emit a sharp aroma when the air pressure changes, and the bark of certain palms smells sweeter before rain, like nature exhaling before it drinks.
Baba hands you a dried blossom, brittle and light. Crush this. You do, and a rush of scent fills the air, ginger, musk, and something cool like mint. When you smell this on your way to market, leave early. That flower doesn't bloom unless rain is 5 hours behind you. It sounds far-fetched, but the logic is clear. If you pay attention to enough scents for long enough, they start to speak. By mid-afternoon, you've practiced scent reading with wet cloths, crushed seeds, mud mixed with ash. Your own skin. Baba insists that when your sweat starts to smell like roasted yam, you've stayed in the sun too long. But the most striking moment comes when you step out after the sun returns and smell something new. Wood smoke, citrus, and earth. It's not coming from the fire pit. It's coming from the wind. Baba inhales deeply. Tomorrow will be clear. You can tell by the way the sky is drying the trees. You laugh. The sky dries trees? He shrugs. And socks and stew and old arguments. It's very efficient. That night you dream of walking through a forest made entirely of scent. Each leaf releases a story, each gust of wind a recipe, and through it all, a soft drumming rain tapping out syllables you almost understand. In the dream, you lean in and whisper to the storm, I can smell you coming, and it smiles.
The next day breaks in absolute stillness. No rooster, no fire crackle. Even the palm fronds seem to hold their breath. You sit outside with Baba Ifaleke, both of you sipping on lukewarm millet porridge, watching the world in soft pause. The morning air carries a peculiar hush, not quite silence, more like the space between inhaling and exhaling. Today, Baba says, we learn about the waiting days. He explains that between seasons, between storms, and sometimes between nothing in particular, the weather simply waits. No wind, no bird call, just the world idling. And for the Yoruba, these waiting days matter just as much as rain or sun. Modern forecasts don't include waiting as a category, but that's when things begin to shift beneath the surface. You nod, slowly realizing this is the meteorological version of a pregnant pause. In Yoruba tradition, waiting days are seen as transitional spaces, times when the boundaries between things are softer, more porous. The elders say, don't make loud decisions on a waiting day. Don't shout indoors, or you risk trapping silence. Don't cook too much spicy food. Waiting days prefer blandness. It's believed that during these periods, the sky listens more than usual, not to prayers, but to behavior. Your actions during still weather are said to echo louder in the days ahead. Historians still debate if these rules were designed to enforce calm, or if calmness was simply what emerged in those moments, and so it became ritual.
You spend the day watching what doesn't happen. The laundry doesn't dry, the goats don't wander, the clouds drift but never gather. It's the kind of day where even your thoughts slow down. You find yourself watching a beetle crawl across your foot for 10 minutes without blinking. Baba hands you a short broom and tells you to sweep the courtyard slowly, not for cleanliness, but to practice stillness in motion. Each sweep is deliberate, soft. You're told not to speak until the broom finishes its circle. This, too, is part of understanding Yoruba weather, not just what it does, but what it asks you to do. Later, you sit under a thatched awning as Baba recounts a story of a legendary priest who once spent 3 months without uttering a word, simply because the sky had gone quiet. People thought he'd lost his mind until the rains returned on the exact day he finally broke silence. Maybe he was just shy, he adds with a wink. Or maybe the clouds wanted space. He shows you the weather beads, strung from bone, clay, and old seeds. Each one represents a type of day: hot, windy, soaking, humming, silent. Today, he slides a plain gray bead to the center of the string. No shine, no pulse, just pause. You learn that waiting days are ideal for cleaning tools, mending clothes, listening to your feet walk, watching steam rise from stew as if it's trying to escape thought.
Baba offers you a folded square of parchment and tells you to write something you're worried about, then bury it in still soil. The idea isn't to hide it, but to offer it up to the slowness. If it's still bothering you tomorrow, dig it up. If not, leave it for the ants. And as the afternoon slides gently into evening, the sun never really shines, but never disappears. The light is soft, like it's been run through a wet cloth. You walk the edge of the yam field and notice how the wind seems to dodge your shoulders, as if not ready to make contact. That night, as you lie down, there's no storm, no cricket symphony, just the sound of your own breath and the subtle awareness that the air is hovering. It's not nothing. It's the exact middle between what was and what comes next. And sometimes, Baba says, that's the most powerful weather of all.
The pause is over. You wake to a change you can't quite name at first. The light is different, not brighter, but cleaner. The wind, which has kept respectfully distant for days, returns in slow spirals, tracing invisible lines along your bare arms. Baba Ifaleke greets you with a grin and a strip of cloth tied like a cape over one shoulder. Today, he says, we chase the winds. He doesn't mean metaphorically. You're going to track them like scouts on a mission. Yoruba weather watching gives the wind a personality, a temper, even a directional attitude. The wind doesn't just blow, it arrives with intent. He begins with a hand-drawn map, a large palm leaf marked in charcoal. It's not geographic, but symbolic. The 4 cardinal winds have names, traits, and predictable mischief. You study. Iwaju, the wind from the front, or east, calm, curious, often signaling morning rains. Eyin, from the back, or west, erratic, moody, brings sudden weather changes. Otun, right-hand wind, or south, heavy, damp, full of secrets. Osi, left-hand wind, or north, dry, loud, always in a hurry. You're told that villagers could once identify the wind's source just by how it touched their earlobes. Some still can. Historians still argue if these wind personalities were rooted in myth or observation, Baba muses. But anyone who's walked with their shirt clinging to just one side knows wind has character. You carry the cloth banner like a wind compass, walking behind Baba across the village paths. He shows you how.
Smoke from a fire tilts at different angles depending on the wind's height. Chickens always face away from strong gusts, but goats stand sideways to measure it. Certain grasses twist clockwise or counterclockwise depending on the wind's dryness. You pause at a rocky outcrop where children have arranged old clay pots. Inside each pot, dust, ash, or ground leaves. When the wind blows, it stirs the contents. If the ash forms a spiral, change is coming. If it sits heavy, stagnation. Baba says, this is the Augboro, our wind altar. No sacrifice, just observation. Midday arrives, and you feel the shift again. The wind changes direction. Baba stops walking and squints at the sky. He says, "Oh, see, she's on the move." And suddenly, the weather turns theatrical. The trees rustle with gossip. The grasses bow not from fear, but familiarity. Laundry flaps wildly like it's trying to break free. You hold the edge of your windcloth out, and it stiffens immediately. The left-hand wind has arrived. Baba recites an old proverb. When Osi speaks, roofs must listen. You learn more.
If the left-hand wind arrives mid-morning in planting season, delay sowing. The soil is too proud to accept seed just yet. If the south wind smells like mint, prepare for heat lightning. If two winds collide, don't argue with anyone until evening. Your words might follow the gusts. Later, you return to the hut and Baba teaches you the wind walk, a meditative pace synchronized with the wind's push and pull. One step forward as the breeze presses, one pause when it fades. It's less walking, more negotiation with the air. And then he tells you the final rule. Never curse the wind directly. Why? Because wind, he says, is the one weather spirit that always comes back. That night, the wind sings across the rooftops in low rhythmic waves. You lie awake a little longer than usual, listening to its song. Tonight, the wind has a rhythm. It's not loud, but it's purposeful, like it's trying to remind you of something you forgot to remember. You wake in the early light to find Baba Ifaleke already seated outside, his robes fluttering gently. He's got a strange contraption in his lap, a shallow wooden tray filled with sand, sprinkled in neat circular patterns. Today, he announces, you'll learn about the dust whispers. You frown, squinting. Does what exactly? It talks, Baba says, matter-of-factly. You just have to watch what it doesn't settle on. And with that, you begin your education in the weather of the dry season, and how the Yoruba, especially the inland priests, use the behavior of dust as a kind of atmospheric oracle. He introduces you to harmattan, the seasonal dry wind that sweeps down from the Sahara like a sleepy dragon. It arrives wrapped in fine sand, desiccated air, and a low, persistent hum in your ears. When the harmattan comes, skin cracks like old bark, lips chap within hours, even your thoughts feel dry. But it's not a curse, it's a clock. The arrival of the first real dust haze means harvests are complete, storage pits are sealed, masks and musical instruments must be oiled before the air splits their seams. Baba lifts a lid off a shallow basin. Inside is a drift of dust, barely a spoonful, but delicate as lace. He blows gently over the surface and watches how it swirls, then settles. If the dust returns to center, the wind will remain steady, he explains. If it breaks to the edge, expect shifting currents. You begin practicing, pouring dust across tiles and watching for directional patterns, placing mirrors outside to see how fast they haze over. Fast means moisture's fleeing. Tracing the shade of the dust in the morning sun. A pale beige means mild winds. Orange-gray signals a heat spike.
And then there are the warnings. If the harmattan arrives early, it's said to steal words. Elders become forgetful, and conversations dry up like rivers. If it arrives late, illness lingers longer, and smoke hangs in the air like old sorrow. Historians still debate whether this is medical logic, dry air worsening respiratory health, or metaphor stacked on metaphor, Baba notes, brushing a speck off his knee. The dust also touches daily rituals. Palm wine is filtered twice instead of once. Cloth is beaten clean with eucalyptus leaves to keep it supple. Messages are sent verbally, not in ink, because parchment crumbles and words hold better when breathed.
You learn an old game children play, whispers in the dust. Each child draws a shape in the fine sand outside their hut, then watches how the wind erases or distorts it. If the pattern vanishes cleanly, a good day. If it scatters unevenly, tread carefully. Later that afternoon, you and Baba climb a small hill beyond the yam fields. From there you can see the dust horizon. Not quite cloud, not quite fog. Just a long, soft blur that makes even the tallest trees seem like charcoal sketches. Look at that, Baba says. When I was your age, I thought the world ended where the dust began. You don't respond right away. There's something oddly peaceful about this parched sky, this filtered light. The world feels muted, like it's speaking in lowercase letters. You breathe in, and the air crackles slightly in your nose. That night, you brush a fine layer of dust from your sleeping mat. It's in your hair, your sandals, even in your dreams. But it doesn't feel like a nuisance. It feels like a soft presence, like someone watching over you, or perhaps watching through you. And you finally understand what Baba meant. Dust doesn't whisper to warn, it whispers to remind of time passing, of things drying, of everything that was once whole slowly returning to the air.
You wake before dawn, lungs filled with dry air and the faint taste of charcoal smoke. Outside, the harmattan lingers like a guest who's overstayed their welcome but still gets to sleep in the good bed. This morning, Baba Ifaleke is uncharacteristically quiet. He hands you a bowl of warm millet and a strip of fabric, a blindfold. Today, he says softly, you learn to feel weather through your skin. You stare at him, half chewing. Like temperature? Temperature is only the beginning, he replies, tying the fabric gently around your eyes. Now walk. And you do, slowly, barefoot, one hand brushing the mud brick wall as your other hovers mid-air like an antenna. It's not disorienting. It's intimate. Every step is a conversation between your feet and the ground. You feel moisture clinging to the underside of grass, a pebble warmed by yesterday's sun, air currents that shift direction at elbow height. Historians still debate whether this tactile awareness was survival instinct or a ritual training, Baba Ifaleke says. But our ancestors read the sky with their skin. You stop walking. A breeze curls around your ankle like a lazy cat, while your chest remains still. Low wind, no lift. Good, Baba says.
Over the next hour, you learn, when your forearms feel cold before your cheeks, dew is close. If the air sticks only to the back of your neck, expect fog by evening. If your shins feel warmth while your nose stays dry, a midday heat spike is coming.
You're shown how to lie on a flat rock and listen through your spine. The vibrations tell you if a storm is stomping your way or passing by on tiptoe. Close your eyes again, Baba instructs, and hold out your hand. He places a bowl of water in your palm. Tell me what you feel. You tilt the bowl slightly. The water resists. The surface tension is high. There's little humidity in the air. He nods. Later, he takes you to the yam barn. Now, touch the rope. It's coarse and dry, with none of the yesterday's sponginess. This guy's been greedy again. It's drinking the air. You begin noticing subtler signs. Clay pots that feel colder than the floor, a sign of a cold front on the move. Fingernails turning slightly pale in the early morning, dry air, not fear. Earlobes stiffening before dawn, harmattan whispering in your blood.
One elder in the village, half blind, nearly mute, can still predict rain simply by walking barefoot across the compound at sunrise. He calls it talking to the floor, Baba explains. Says the ground gossips better than people do. That evening, the ritual continues. Baba hands you a bowl of shea butter. You rub it across your arms slowly until your skin shines. Then you stand beneath the overhang and wait for the air to choose you. It does. First as a cool breath across your shoulders, then as a heat trapped behind your knees. You're learning, Baba murmurs. Soon you'll feel tomorrow before it arrives. The wind shifts. You lift your chin, not to smell or listen, but to sense. And for the first time, you truly feel like a part of the forecast, not just watching it, not just naming it, being it. That night, the air wraps itself around your body like memory, and you drift to sleep not by counting thoughts or listening to rain, but by tracing the story your skin told you all day.
The morning light filters in like diluted honey, thick, soft, and barely interested in waking you. But Baba Ifaleke is already up, tapping gently on a hollow log outside the hut in a slow, deliberate rhythm. You recognize it now. Not a summons, but a signal. The kind used by old priests to tell the village, no rush today, let the sky decide. You yawn, stretch, and shuffle outside. Today, Baba says, we talk about the smells of dry thunder. You blink. Dry thunder has a smell? He chuckles. Everything does, even silence. But yes, when lightning strikes with no rain, the earth gives off a different story. You sit with him beside the yam barn, sipping lukewarm ginger tea, and listen. He begins with the concept of dry storms, those uncanny events during the harmattan when the sky flashes angrily, thunder rumbles, but the ground remains thirsty. No raindrops, just tension. These storms are messengers without letters, Baba says. They warn, they don't explain. You learn to recognize the scorched scent that follows a dry lightning strike. Sharp, like burnt orange peel and iron. It lingers in the air like a question no one wants to answer. Historians still debate whether this scent is ozone or old superstitions, but we know it when we smell it. He takes you to a tree just outside the village, its bark slightly blackened. A bolt had struck it 2 days prior, no fire, no rain,
just a sudden crack, and this resinous metallic perfume now baked into the trunk.
Baba runs a hand over the bark. Feel that? He says. That's ina ufurufu, sky fire. You can smell its footprints. Then he teaches you the ritual of the scorched leaf. You pluck a broad, dry leaf from the guava tree. Hold it over a clay bowl until the scent of dry heat rises. Not smoke, just warm memory. Then breathe it in. That, he says, is the difference between summer and warning. Throughout the day, you learn that dry thunder often leaves a bitter pepper scent on stones. Cracked soil smells faintly sweet right before a dry strike. Certain animals, especially the village dogs, become anxious hours in advance, sniffing the air and pacing as if trying to catch the scent of fire. There's a word for this unease, afuko, meaning pre-thunder breath. Not a myth, not magic, just paying attention. You also learn the cultural etiquette of dry thunder. Don't argue during it. Don't whisper secrets, the air carries them too well. Don't hang clothes on the line, the wind will remember their scent and misplace them.
That evening, the sky begins to rumble again. No clouds, no breeze, just a slow, grumbling protest from somewhere overhead. You stand barefoot, watching the light shift on the horizon, and then crack! A bolt of lightning forks silently across the sky. It leaves behind no fire, but the smell hits your nose within seconds. Ozone, stone, burnt leaf, distant regret. Do you smell it? Baba asks quietly. You nod. It's not fear. It's just the sky, reminding you it's alive. And just like that, it passes. No rain, no answer. Just a soft scent left behind like a forgotten name in the air. That night, you lie awake a little longer than usual, trying to hold on to that fragrance. It slips away, like all sky messages do, but you sleep knowing that next time your nose will remember.
You wake to drums, not loud ones, but distant, ceremonial, like someone coaxing the clouds into a polite conversation. Baba Ifaleke stands at the edge of the compound, arms crossed, face turned upward.
Today, he says without turning around, you'll learn about sky shapes.
You glance upward. It's a cloudy day, but not dramatically so. The sky looks like it's wearing a soft gray wrapper. Creased, uneven, but comforting. Nothing threatening, just layered.
Not all clouds mean rain, Baba continues. Some mean waiting. Some mean trickery. Some are just showing off.
He beckons you to follow him toward a raised wooden platform overlooking the fields. On it sits a polished calabash filled with water, still as glass. It reflects the entire sky, but upside down.
Today, you'll learn to read the sky by watching the earth.
He gestures to the water.
You see how it catches the light, even when the sun's behind a cloud. That's a sky that hasn't decided what it wants yet.
Baba introduces you to the local cloud lexicon.
Irinyi Orun.
Sky footsteps. Those thin, streaky clouds that spread like sandal trails. They signal change. Ayati Sun. The world is sleeping. Wide, uniform grayness that dulls sound and light. A day for stillness. Ojo ashale aluko. The kingfishers lie. Bright blue pockets that disappeared before rain. Pretty, but untrustworthy. Historians still debate if these names came from folk tales or farming, Baba says, but the clouds don't care either way. You spend the day lying on your back beside the water bowl, watching the sky shift. Wisps that resemble egret wings. Thick, low-hanging clouds that sit like grandmothers refusing to stand. A rare vertical streak that Baba says is Orun's spine showing. You begin noticing the movement of sky shapes, how quickly they stretch or retreat. Fast stretch, expect wind. Sudden collapse, rain. Wide drift, safe to leave your yams uncovered. There's a local trick too. Hold up your fingers, spaced a hand width apart. If you can fit 3 clouds between them with no blue, it'll rain. If only one, you're safe. Baba also shows you how to use shadows, not their size, their sharpness. On days when shadows blur before noon, rain will come before evening. If they sharpen mid-morning and then fade, you're looking at deceitful light. Around midday, clouds gathered like gossiping uncles, round, slow, with thick middles and frilly edges. Baba points to them with a grin. Rain bellies, he calls them. By late afternoon, a different formation creeps in, long, low, and slightly green at the edges. Baba narrows his eyes. That's not sky, it's intention. And sure enough, within the hour, the first drops begin to fall. Gentle at first, then steady. The clouds aren't loud. They simply mean it.
You sit beneath the thatch awning, watching the reflections in the calabash ripple with each drop. I used to think the sky was unpredictable, you murmur. Baba hands you a cloth to dry your feet. No, the sky is like a tired teacher. It gives you the same lesson every time. You just don't always take notes. That night, your dreams are filled with cloud creatures, some kind, some evasive, all of them whispering in a dialect made of moisture and light. And when you wake, the sky is blue again. But now you know, blue doesn't mean silence. It just means the next sentence hasn't started yet.
The morning is unusually clear. A sky as flat and blue as polished stone hangs overhead. No clouds, no birds, no gossip. It's the kind of day where everything feels freshly ironed, including your nerves. But Baba Ifaleke seems amused. Aha, he says, gesturing toward the shadows dancing beneath a cassava tree. You're about to meet the sun's trickiest cousin. You squint. The sun has a cousin? He chuckles. Today, we study light changes, how the Yoruba used subtle shifts in light, color, density, and movement to predict weather, mood, and even divine attention. You both sit near a puddle from last night's rain. Baba places 3 stones around it, then waits. Within minutes, the puddle reflects different hues as the sun climbs. You watch as the edges shimmer yellow, then peach. The center turns blue-green. Then it dulls, as if the sun blinked. You see, that's not shadow, that's sky mood. He teaches you the names of 5 light shifts that precede weather events.
Ina Ataro, conversation light. Soft golden haze that arrives before important announcements, whether rain or revelation. Orunyara, horrid light. When shadows race ahead of you, wind is coming. Imoleti Kogbo, deaf light, dazzling brightness without heat, often a false sign of good weather. Itonwa Ojuoru, sky searchlight, narrow beams breaking through clouds that signal local rain pockets. Imoleo loro, rich man's light, a reddish, slow-burning afternoon glow that usually precedes thunder but fools farmers into delaying harvest. Historians still argue whether these classifications were spiritual or observational, Baba muses, but everyone agrees when the shadows look drunk, don't plant. He shows you how different surfaces react. Bronze darkens unevenly just before a heat spike. Good horns reflect pink during mist buildup. Even certain fish scales, especially from the Epa, gleam dull when stormlight is near. Then comes the lesson of the reflected world. You are taken to a clear stream. Baba holds up a mirror to the surface and says, "Watch the trees." Not above you, below.
At first, it's strange, watching the world upside down through ripples. But slowly, you understand. The reflected world reveals what's about to shift, while the upright world hides in its own comfort. When the reflection distorts without movement, rain is building in the air. When the colors sharpen suddenly in water, but not on land, wind, fast wind. As the day drifts on, Baba points out that even your own shadow behaves differently depending on light texture. A fuzzy edge means humidity. A sharp drop off your chin, hence a dry wind. A vanishing shadow at midday doesn't mean stillness. It means the sky is holding its breath. Later, you sit beneath the awning, watching laundry on the line go from ivory to gold to flat white again. It's like the sun keeps changing its mind, you say. Baba grins, or maybe we're just catching up to its thoughts. As the day cools, you notice the walls of the compound seem slightly pink. Not blushing exactly, just glowing. Baba calls it the evening hum, a time when the light isn't loud but lingers. He hands you a small polished stone. Hold this at sunset. If it glows warm, tomorrow will be dry. If it stays cool, the rain comes back. You test it. Warm. And for the first time, you believe a rock can speak on behalf of the sky. That night, before bed, you study the flickering flame of the oil lamp beside your mat. Even it bends slightly east, caught in some late-night conversation with a breeze you cannot feel. You close your eyes, and your dreams are filled not with images, but light. Soft hues, strange gleams, glowing reflections, all of them telling stories without words. And in your sleep, you listen.
You awaken to the sound of dripping, not rain exactly, but the after of rain. The world is exhaling water. Each leaf on the palm tree outside releases one silvery droplet at a time, like it's shedding memories. Baba Ifaleke finds you staring at the sky. "Good," he says. "You're ready to learn about the calendar of clouds." You blink. "I thought we already talked about clouds." He grins. "We talked about shapes. Today, we talk about schedules." He leads you behind the yam barn, where a wall is painted in concentric circles, like ripples in a pond. It's not decorative, it's a calendar. Each ring represents a lunar month, and within it, tiny marks and symbols show when certain sky behaviors were observed. This, he says, is our Ojo Arun, the Sky Day calendar. You learn that for centuries, Yoruba priests tracked first mist of planting season, last shadow of dry season, the first refusal of rain when clouds came but held back. They didn't mark time in weeks or numbers, but in returning behaviors, when the red heron circled twice, when the goats stopped eating leaves,
when the clouds blinked before noon. Historians still argue how much was symbolic and how much was climate science, Baba says, rubbing a thumb over one faded mark shaped like a wave. But this, he says, this kept us alive. You are handed a weather stick, smooth and painted with colored beads. Each bead represents a reoccurring weather event.
Deep blue, first storm. Yellow, wind shift. Green, high pollen fog. Red, silent lightning. Gray, the ghost days, when everything seems off. You begin helping Baba read the season. He asks, "When did the Oja Fun Fun, the white market mist, last appear? How many nights since the silent heat? Did the wind blow from the east for 2 mornings in a row?" These are not riddles, they are clues. And then comes the most important event, the palm nut rain. A short, sharp burst of rain that falls like clockwork when the palm fruits begin to ripen. If it arrives on time, harvest will be good. If early, watch for mold. If late, prepare for argument. Argument, you ask? He nods. People quarrel more when the palm rain is late. It dries their patience. You both review the calendar again. Baba makes a new mark near the outer ring. Oja Akoku Sun, the day the rooster tree slept. Apparently, a certain tree bloomed early this year, and Baba is worried the calendar might be shifting.
Nothing wrong with change, he says, but only if you're paying attention. By afternoon, you're making your own weather calendar, drawing rings in the dust and pressing pebbles into place. Baba peers over your shoulder and nods approvingly. You've got the rhythm, he says, but remember, weather doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. Later he shares a final proverb. A fool watches the sky once and declares a season. A wise one listens every day and calls it a conversation. That night, before you sleep, you mark your own ring in the sand just outside the hut. One tiny groove. You whisper, "Palm nut rain hasn't come yet." And though it's nothing more than a line in dust, you feel it anchor you to the sky. You're no longer just under the weather. You're inside its story.
You wake before dawn to an unusual quiet, not empty but full of held breath. The kind of silence that feels like something is about to change, and even the insects know it. Today is your final lesson. Baba Ifaleke greets you with a long look, his eyes crinkled at the corners. He says nothing at first, just hands you a palm nut and gestures toward the fire pit, where a soft ember still glows. You've watched the wind, tasted the dust, felt the sky in your bones, he says gently. Now it's time to understand the ritual of return. You follow him into the clearing just beyond the compound. There's a small shrine there, half hidden under climbing vines and palm fronds. Not grand, not intimidating, just waiting. At its center lies a smooth bowl carved from a single chunk of stone. It's filled with water, pale yellow in the morning light. Surrounding it are 12 small tokens, each one shaped like a symbol you've come to recognize. The wind swirl of Oshi, a cracked sun for dry thunder,
a feather etched with dew lines, a bead carved like a sleeping eye. This is where we send back the questions, Baba explains. You sit beside him and listen as he tells the story of Orunmila, the deity of wisdom, and how the Yoruba believe that every answer we seek from the sky is a question that must first return. No knowledge is permanent. No reading is perfect. Only the relationship with weather remains constant. Historians still puzzle over how priests remembered all this without paper, he says. But our calendars were never silent. They rustled, they flickered, they spoke through leaves, wind, skin, scent, and shadow. You are handed the palm nut again. This one has been used before, slightly charred on one end, a faint red line across the middle. You are to drop it in the bowl. If it floats left, continue as planned. If right, wait. If it circles, ask again tomorrow. You drop it in. It hovers, spins once, then glides left.
Baba nods. The weather says go forward. You're not sure what that means. Maybe it doesn't matter. The point isn't certainty, it's rhythm. You've joined the conversation now. The rest of the day is spent quietly returning things. The water jug is refilled and left open to catch wind-blown leaves. The calendar ring is gently smoothed over with your fingers. The dust from the lesson on whispers is gathered in a cloth and sprinkled at the base of a banana tree. Everything that was borrowed from the sky, the earth, the senses, you give it back. Near dusk, Baba hands you a soft cloth bundle. Inside, one weather bead, one feather, and a folded slip of palm parchment that reads, "You are not here to master the sky. You are here to know when it is speaking." You sit together as twilight deepens. The air cools. The trees sway, but just barely. No clouds. No thunder. No wind ceremony. Just a closing scene, as soft as breath on a mirror. You've spent weeks listening to the Yoruba priest's language of weather, not just prediction, but participation. Now you realize you don't need a forecast to feel the storm. You don't need a chart to trust the season. You only need to keep listening. And as night settles fully over the village, you lie down on your mat for the last time. Not as a visitor, not even as a student, but as a weather watcher. A small part of the sky's memory.
So now, as your eyes grow heavier and the world outside your window softens into hush, take a long, slow breath. Let the stillness of those waiting days return to you, the moments where nothing happened, yet everything shifted. Let your mind wander back to the soft rattle of palm nuts, the whisper of dust in a sunbeam, the sway of clouds too lazy to rain. You've walked through a place where time was measured by breezes, where shadows carried warnings, and where the wind had a voice older than language. Let your limbs feel heavy now, like earth after a long drizzle. Let the tension in your hands melt like mist into morning. The kind of morning where goats are quiet, yams are sleeping, and the sky doesn't need to explain itself. You've learned the names of the winds, the moods of the clouds, and the scent of lightning without rain. You've sat with someone who listens more than he speaks, and you've remembered that weather isn't always about watching from a distance. Sometimes it's about being still enough
to belong. So let the air in your room settle now. Let your breathing find its rhythm, soft and steady. You don't need to dream tonight. You've already walked through one. End of script. Sweet dreams.